Stamp duty, land tax, painful for me and for anybody else buying second homes. Obviously, we're a development business as well, so that's going to affect us. That's £2,000 on every £100,000 worth of stuff you buy. They also closed the loophole where if you were bought at auctions, they also now include the auction fee in the total fee now. So if you're paying like 4% auction fee or something, that's part of the purchase of the property. So
they get more that way.
Yeah, get even more that way. So yeah, that's going to be fairly colossal. But having had a thought about it, I think put it out there, this probably sounds like a ludicrous statement for me to make, but I think it's probably actually a fairly good thing. Like it's a reasonable rise, I think. I know that sounds a bit crazy because it's going to cost me money personally.
It could have been a lot worse.
It could have been a lot worse.
Testing.
Right, hello everybody, my name's Matthew and I'm Matthew Cox Enterprise Channel. Today what we're going to be looking at is the budget. So you would have seen, no doubt, that there was a new budget in the UK, first for 14 years as they keep going on about, under the Labour government. And we're going to see exactly how that's going to impact us all, whether you're a working person, a business owner, or whatever definition you are. And what we've got for you is a special treat. So we've got 3 guests on today covering accountancy, pensions and kind of tax planning and will stuff. So you'll see my guests very shortly. They'll introduce themselves and hopefully they're going to add some really, really good quality information and opinions and views for you to take away some little snippets so that you can kind of plan yourself for the budget. Hello everybody, we're here today with my expert panel of people and we have been watching the budget that's been released today and we've been kind of having a bit of a conflab and a mother's meeting. So what we're going to do is talk to you guys about our kind of key tips and takeaways from it initially. So our expert panel here, we're joined by Matt and I'll let him introduce himself and work around the table.
Sure, my name is Matt Machan from Machan Wealth Management and we're a financial advisory business.
I'm Sharon Bishop from Awesome Accountants. I'm a chartered accountant and here to help.
And my name is Karl Marriott from Marriott Succession Planning, wills, estate planning, trusts, and succession planning in particular for me.
And if you don't know me, I'm Matt and I'm just an entrepreneur. Right, let's get going then. So the budget, I suppose there are kind of 3 main kind of areas, I suppose. So we've got pension changes, a bit of property changes, and then kind of national insurance tax related stuff. So we're looking at trying to plug a £40 billion black hole or deficit, whatever way you want to use the terminology.
22 billion.
22 billion, but 22 wasn't it?
But it's 40 billion.
It's probably 40 billion by now.
Yeah.
I mean, they've spent a lot of money already, haven't they? So, I don't know if anyone wants to leap in at all first, but maybe we could look at the pension stuff because they made some pretty big changes on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously they changed the pensions from it forming part of your estate from 2027. So previously, usually your pension did fall outside of your estate for inheritance tax planning. So they're frozen the inheritance tax bans up until 2030, and then from 2027, your pension will now form part of your estate.
So as a financial advisor and planner, pension planning was a fairly big area simply because you could top up your pension if you had the right allowable allowances and move it outside your estate for your future generations to potentially inherit it tax-free. Well, obviously that's changing. So the dynamic of the planning, depending on that person, might have to change over the next few years, depending.
Yeah. Do you think that's going to affect many people in terms of getting to those thresholds?
They gave a number, didn't they? So the sort of top.
Yeah, so I think inheritance tax only 6%. Yeah.
So in reality, that's a reasonably small number of the actual population. But from the people that kind of we're talking to and our client base predominantly, where they're in that kind of market, otherwise they're not really talking to us.
Yeah.
So for us it's going to be a very big change and a big almost an opportunity for us because we're going to have to be talking to people again about how they deal with it in the future. So it's a lot of new conversations to be had, I think.
I think people were expecting a change in the 25%, that was good.
Yeah.
That didn't.
That's the 25% tax relief. You get free 25% of your pension that you can draw down when you get to whatever age it is, just for the audience that don't know.
Yeah.
They didn't touch that though, did they?
No, they didn't touch that, and also tax relief. So and tax relief. So if you pay into a personal pension, you get your 20% tax relief or 40%. So as someone who's self-employed, it can be quite a good way to potentially claim back some tax into your personal pot.
Mhm.
A lot of people who are self-employed do it to not pay as much tax and have it in their pot for later down the line. But obviously we don't know what the rules are going to be in 10, 15 years. But for now, is it the best option? It might be. It might not be for some people. So
That's
gonna
what we're here to tell them, isn't it?
absolutely, yeah.
So do you think there's anything people might react to today, or you think it's more kind of now you're just going to have to advise people to maybe change what they're doing in the future? So because must have like a demographics of people. So you've got like your person that's in the pension drawdown age, whereas I don't know, someone like myself, you know, I'm 20 years or more away from probably wanting to need it. So those kind of two demographics of people that you'd be talking to, you're going to have to give different advice to them.
Absolutely. I think, from my perspective, you know, we only sort of deal with what's here and now, what we know. So again, yesterday we were dealing with one thing. Obviously, people were waiting for the budget. As I said to you before, a lot of people are either making jumps to do something, or they were waiting for the budget to find out what we should or shouldn't do. So our advice would have to just be now. This is the rules right now. This is our advice right now. So again, we'll have to work out what that advice exactly is, based on individual circumstances.
Yeah.
But we'll have to see what it's going to be.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, and I think there is potentially a split conversation for people who are in retirement age to people who are maybe 20, 30, starting their career. Usually from a planning perspective, we look to touch the pension last because it's outside your estate.
Yeah.
And whereas now people who maybe have worked 30, 40 years to build up a nice sized pension pot, all of a sudden that might form part of their estate and they're potentially losing 40% overnight. So if they haven't touched it, do they touch it now? How do they use that cash? Do they pass it down? Do they invest it elsewhere? That's areas that, as you say, unique circumstances, isn't it?
Yeah. And we're going to have to work out what they are going to be in what's just changed. So.
Definitely.
For your kind of, I suppose, more lucky person that is perhaps not so educated on their pension, so they fit into that client band for yourself where they've got like £1 million worth of assets and they might have £1 million pension or something. What is there like a kind of sort of for dummies way of explaining it? Because obviously a lot of people it won't matter to, but you're saying that obviously it's now included, whereas previously it wasn't, but there are certain thresholds for that though, wasn't there?
So we could just clarify?
Sure. So what were the thresholds before and what they are now, I suppose?
So from an IHT perspective, for an individual, it was £325,000 as a single amount, which you can pass on to your spouse, tax-free, and that remains. And then there was a bit of a question about the 175,000 residence nil rate band, whether that was going to go or not, and it didn't go. It's still here, so
you've got 325 of your personal assets, which is non-taxable.
Non-taxable, and then this other £175,000 per person if you have a residence worth more than 175 or 350 for a couple. That is also non-taxable if you leave it to your descendants, your children, grandchildren, etc. So. It's still £1 million for most couples to leave to their children. That hasn't changed in itself. Although there's a couple of changes. We'll talk about agriculture and bits and pieces that come back in a little bit, but there aren't that many of those in reality. But obviously now bringing that pension in, I mean, we're obviously all based down south, where, property prices, you might know a bit more about what the average property prices are down here. I think 700,000 or something.
Yeah, 750 for your kind of 4 beds, detached type house. That's kind of quite
family
average.
house down here for someone doing all right for themselves. Putting their pension into it, they're going to be bang over £1 million straight away.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And previously that was completely, you could just hand that
down.
And
our advice would have been put it into a pension, get it out of the way.
So we say like it's the top. Like more 6%, but actually, if you take into consideration your £750,000 house, bearing in mind a lot of people will probably own that house when they're about 50, so it'll be worth $1 million by the time you get there. So I know the goalpost might change, but it's good to plan in the future because the property is probably going to be worth more anyway.
And I think if you look forward as well, they're frozen to 2030. The rates. Cost of living is going to go up. People want more. Prices are going to go up. So although it's fixed at $1 million. Actually, in real terms, you're probably going to be getting less bang for your buck in 6 years' time.
And the number of the 6% was before today's announcement, effectively. So that I mean, I don't know what the number's going to be, but we just said people down here, there's going to be a lot of people.
That 6% is going to increase, isn't it?
Who knows what? But
Yes.
Which is good for business, but then we'll come on to the more tax. We're going to get hammered in a minute. So what was the agricultural thing then? Because I missed that bit.
Yeah, so again, I wanted to clarify the exact points, but it was basically beforehand you could pass a farm over to your children with that completely tax-free, effectively.
Yeah.
But now I think it's over £1 million. Then you get a 50% relief above that. So we're going an effective rate of 20% over the £1 million, which comes in 2027. Is that correct?
I believe so, off the top of my head, yeah.
So agricultural, they didn't. I wasn't quite too sure what they meant about that bit.
Yeah, so I think, and we'll just confirm, I think basically it was if you own a farm once upon a time, or yesterday in fact, you could leave, well actually even for the next couple of years we think, you can leave that farm to your children. It was originally tax-free. Now the rules appear to have changed from 2027 that you get your first £1 million free. So again, a lot of farms it won't affect, but the bigger farms, over and above that, you get a 50% rate over the million. So it's 50% is tax-free, which effectively is a 20% inheritance tax on that farm. So if it's a £2 million farm, it's going to be a £500,000 taxable, 20% effectively, 40%, £200,000, which is going to make life a bit more difficult for that kind of people.
Yeah, but again, a fairly small,
relatively small,
in that
absolutely.
sense. Yeah,
but again, it's going to be the choice of whether you sell it or whether you don't. We'll come on to what happens if you sell a business in a little bit. But that's all going to change. So it's still that top end is getting stuck.
Yeah, I think I don't know. Maybe you'll find out tomorrow if your phone's ringing off the hook. But it wasn't like without the 25% reduction thing. It didn't seem as dramatic as perhaps we were anticipating it. I think that's big news. Not being able to ring fence that from your estate, but there were so many other things that were talked about in the lead up, weren't there?
Yeah, we were hearing things like the R&RB being lost. Which would have made a massive difference.
Yeah,
and it wasn't. So again, we just mentioned briefly. Actually, it wasn't quite as blockbusting kind of an overall budget. As I was expecting. I was actually expecting to sit here and be a bit more doom and gloom, but it's not quite.
They're rules, aren't they? I mean, they change every 6 months, every year. It's just in all our industries, it's adapting to them and trying to, do what's best moving forward with each and every rule. And for every client, every person in the business, it changes, doesn't it? But I was expecting it to be a little bit more doom and gloom. I think there are some positives out of it as well. But again, time will tell. It's just adapting to the rules as quickly as possible and trying to put almost a plan in place for each and every person you deal with, really. Yeah.
So I suppose intrinsically connected to that wealth building tool would be the business, really, which we'll move on to now. They mentioned about national insurance contributions for employers and various other incentives / maybe they're deleting some of the stuff they're taking from one hand and giving to the other. That's going to affect an awful lot of small businesses, which is some of your space, Sharon, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the national minimum wage, that's going to have a bigger impact on smaller businesses. Not just the fact that they're going to be paying out more for the more junior level staff. You've got staff that may have been with them a while that will then think, well, they've had a pay rise when I get one. The small businesses can't necessarily afford that. Obviously, you've then got we're
saying like the gap between like your senior member of staff and your entry level member of staff will get smaller because obviously the pay rise is quite big at the bottom end.
Yes.
I think I worked out it's between 22 and 24 grand a year, depending on kind of how many hours you're open. Like if you do like 9 till 5:30 or 9 till 5 or something like that, it will vary. But if you're on 24 grand a year, which is 9 till 5:30, that's quite a big wage for minimum wage. So that's the starting level.
Yeah.
And don't forget 18-year-olds, so the 18 to 20-year-olds that were currently on less.
Yeah,
that's even a 16%, isn't it?
They're
up to £10
an hour for now. I'm going to join it, so they'll be the same from 18 plus. Huge difference.
Yeah, I think you're saying it's going to affect a lot of small businesses and closing that gap between your senior members, maybe like your middle management, your people on like 30 to 35k, you're going to feel really hit by that.
Yeah, and then add in employers' national insurance changes. They're going to have to pay it from 5,000. Yes, some of them might get the employer's allowance because that's increased. But a lot of them, if you've got a handful of employees, that's not going to last long.
No.
I think on 30,000 salary, you're looking at over £800 more.
Yeah.
So that extra national insurance
It's a big
allowance,
rate, isn't it?
it will soon go. And I think we worked out that on a 24,000 salary, it's actually probably going to cost nearer 30,000.
Yeah.
So for an employer, that may actually stop them employing another member of the team.
Do you think? I mean, there used to be, so like there's loads of directors, like pretty much anyone that runs their own company will do the kind of classic, pay themselves $9,100 a year so they don't pay employers national insurance, and then they'll draw the rest out as dividends. Obviously, they're going to be affected by that as well, aren't they? Because that's going to go down to £5,000. So effectively, their dividend withdrawals are going to be taxed at anywhere between 7.5% and 32.5%. Depending on their rate. So that's an extra kind of stealthy way of taxing a little bit.
And if you're a director-only company, you don't qualify for the employer's allowance. So you're going to be paying more national insurance if you go slightly over. Obviously, you want to keep your national insurance contribution going so that your stamp, as they call it, going. But the benefit to a one-man director company,
business,
there isn't, that is going to increase their costs.
Because they gave the headline figure or idea of having is 4 people employed on 24 grand a year or something. But your average business, the business owner is going to be on like 50k, and then they might have 2 members of staff. So it's not exactly encouraging like growth and enterprise, is it, to take on more members of staff? No. Do you think it's going to lead to a lot of self-employed people in the sort of gig economy as it's branded?
Yeah, I think so, because I think there's a lot of people that don't want to be employers anyway. And I think this is going to add to that negativity about employing people. Obviously, there's rules that they have to meet to make sure they don't breach any of the IR35 rules. And that side of things to make sure that they are classed as a self-employed person. But I think we will see more of it because it's not cost effective for the employer.
I'm thinking like your hairdressers, the salons, and those. That nothing else springs to mind right now, but I'm sure there's like anywhere where it like really lends itself to being like you can rent a chair, for instance, and then we keep 20% of what you're earning or something like that, or whatever it might. I don't know. There's probably more than that, the percentage, but those sort of roles are going to be massive now. Like they're almost not going to bother employing people.
And it's also going to put existing pressure on your existing staff, because if you do need to make a cost saving somewhere, who are your most valuable staff members, because you're paying more to have the same amount of staff. So there's an additional pressure on on the staff as well to keep up their work as well.
And a person that employs like nearly 30 people, obviously it's going to affect us. But generally speaking, when we've had this before, you then just look at your pricing and you put your pricing up. But the knock-on effect of that is that it's like this spiral, isn't it? Where you've got employee goes, I need a pay rise. So they give them a pay rise, but then that means the company that they work for probably has to put their prices up, which means someone over here has to pay more for that service, which then they want a pay rise. And that's just effectively fueling inflation, really, isn't it? Yeah. And I think a lot of easy ways out for businesses will be trimming the bush, essentially, which is I just refer to as like get rid of the crap clients and then the ones that pay you well. So the staff, either they'll cut back on staff or they'll go, right, blanket pay rise. You're going for a cup of coffees, touching on £4 most of the places. It will now suddenly touch on £5, I suspect, because they'll just start going, we need to generate more income to afford for all of this stuff.
I just bring it's completely irrelevant to this bit, but the 1p saving on beer and dragon is such a small amount, it'll never get passed on, and that's not my point. The pennies don't count because they're not going to charge, a penny less or a penny more for something, so it goes up to the next pound or the next 50p or whatever it might be.
But it's a great talking point, isn't it?
I knock off a penny off your beer, but the person pouring it is now on 25%
I did
more than they were
notice
before.
in the house, that was the loudest bit. The penny off beer was all,
Or even hear the staff in the background on board. So, but I think it's meaningless, quite frankly.
Absolutely, of course.
especially if the person serving it is going to have to be paid more, or it's going to cost the business more. You take Wetherspoons, for example. They're obviously quite cheap on their beer. Penny, they're not going to pass that on, I wouldn't have thought. But yet their staff are going to cost them, what was it, 1.5% more. Yeah, so just deleted the 1.7% saving.
Even in Wetherspoons, they're still not the same.
I think that it will have a knock-on effect, and I personally worry that it's going to fuel inflation a little bit, because I think it will get into this wage spiral like we did before, where everyone's just paying people more and more and more because the food shopping's going up and the rest of it, and cost of living.
That was the response from Rishi Sunak, basically, wasn't it? It was literally you're saying all these things on one hand, but none of it's going to actually really manifest at the other side of it. So
to help the working people. The working people are the ones that are going to be paying more for whatever it is that they're buying.
Because it has to come from somewhere. The business puts their price up, and therefore, it's more expensive for the person to buy it because they're more expensive. But they don't see any of that at all.
And from the numbers we were given, the working person is 90% by the sound of it of the population. They're still
haven't
spending.
defined working.
What is it exactly?
We're further to out there still. On the hope that we know. But but there's still that majority by the sound of it. So it sounds like it's good for them, but it isn't really.
I thought working person might have referred to someone that perhaps gets their income from like passive nature or something like property or stocks and shares. Whereas it seems to be just like anybody that isn't just a PAYE employee, basically.
I think it is
like a standard,
kind of worker.
And I think what they've subtly taxed throughout the budget is targeting people like that, with capital gains going up slightly. Business relief, over the next few years and things like that. Agricultural relief we've touched on. So I think subtly they've gone after taxing those types of people who might have additional sources of income, but in a way where it's not that noticeable unless you deep dive into it. From
the capital gains tax was it's not straight away though, was it? The increase.
I think it is. Yeah, so 10%. Goes to 18%, and then the 20% goes to 24%. So, you're a high rate taxpayer. 20 to 24 is okay, but if you're, basic rate taxpayer paying 10% to 18, that could be quite a significant amount.
There was talk about that being levelled with income tax, 20 and 40, though, wasn't it?
Inheritance tax. Inheritance tax. So that was one of the things that I was expecting to happen, was it would actually might go to 40%.
But capital gains. Inheritance. There was a lot of talk about that prior to the budget, wasn't there?
Which they haven't done. So
it seems like they've leaked a little bit over the last 3-4 weeks. What do they like? What do they not like? Let's just take this bit out. Let's tweak it.
I don't know how much that's based on the response to it, or whether it's a false release of information to gauge it.
Maybe, and I think. From a business point of view, because ultimately they kind of are a business, aren't they? Their job is to deal with the economy. They've got to act in those constraints. It's probably sensible for them to release some of that information, feed it to the public, see how they react, and then maybe adjust things slightly, testing the water.
Seems to be.
There seemed to be a lot of testing the water. I was wondering whether we were going to see anything new today.
But again, that's also one of the chaps on the TV was basically saying he was underwhelmed, which is the harsh word. But actually, I think we were a little bit by the sound of it. I don't think there was good news going off our part, with the NHS and bits and pieces. But it's sort of I was expecting more doom and gloom, but a bigger change. It hasn't been quite as big a change as I was expecting.
Because I think the national insurance increases and fiddling with the kind of thresholds for that was their biggest thing that was going to raise the most money, really, wasn't it?
Well, that's the 40 billion they think. They raise it from that effect, don't they?
They reckon about 20 to 25 billion of it's going to come from national insurance.
It's a staggering number, isn't it?
And the rest comes from the private jets. That's fine. Yeah.
Better sell all of those.
Yeah.
I've got a load lined up on the runway.
CGT, I've got a bunch of CGT.
That's 4%.
Because I'm so wealthy and I can buy a private jet and 400 quid. I mean, it would have been some tax before anyway. It's only like double, so it's gone 200 to 400.
Yeah.
And I think, as I was saying before, it will be tax deductible, and those people that can afford jets will be at a 45% tax rate, or commercial tax maybe.
In a 1 hour and I think it was 1 hour and 20-minute speech, maybe, to spend 30 seconds talking about private jets just to get a little dig in across the hallway.
Yeah.
It seems like it's a bit irrelevant, really, but anyway.
It does.
It's two rival schools going at it, isn't it?
Yeah, very much.
But you don't blame them. If you were acting for them, you would do the same thing.
Why not?
Yeah. I'm surprised there was no Boris bashing or anything going on, but
I think it was secretly, subtly.
On that nature, I mean, to do with business as well, just leading on from that, was the talk about the COVID crime prevention. What was it called?
Corruption.
COVID corruption officer or something.
Yeah, something like that. Yes.
And I had my thoughts on that I guess that's like to look at all the companies that maybe took out bounce back loans or whatever, and then they wound up their companies, or maybe, I don't know, if it seems a bit like there's two camps on that COVID loan thing. There's ones that have wound up their companies and one that maybe inflated their figures to borrow more, but they've actually paid it back. I mean, they didn't really go into too much detail as to exactly what that would be. But my fear personally with these government things is that they set these things a task and it costs millions and billions to do it, and they recover like 100 million. Yeah. And it's like, kind of the money spent, you did it, and what are you going to do? Say to people, there was no personal guarantor on the loan and you wound your company up. Well, you basically have to prove that they did something completely illegal, like set the company up to do that, or maybe, I mean, you could do them for like fibbing on their because it was based on turnover from memory.
I mean, they have been doing that anyway.
Yeah.
But there has been quite a lot of discrepancy between the punishment, really, because there was one case where they inflated their turnover, borrowed too much, repaid it straight away. Both directors went to prison.
Really?
I haven't heard of many of those.
Yeah.
Not many.
There was another one where it wasn't repaid, but he just got a slap on the wrist.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering whether it might be something to do with bringing in some sort of consistency as well to it.
Yeah.
Considering you paid the loan back and you go to prison.
But I suppose if
Crazy,
you fibbed about your turnover and then you borrowed from the public purse, then that's probably you've committed that, haven't you?
Yeah.
But
I mean, they did say, didn't they, the car sales, the percentage, the month after the bounce back loans came out.
Well, it wasn't very well defined as to what you could actually use the money for. That was the problem. You weren't allowed to use it to pay your own. You weren't allowed to use to pay your own salary, and I don't think you could like invest it into stocks and shares or something like that. Or probably
it wasn't very clear at the beginning.
No,
there's a lot of people were using it for deposits of houses.
Really?
Then afterwards, and I feel like that sort of you then were in default because it was a loan you had, which meant you couldn't get the mortgage. So sort of you couldn't do it in the future because you'd had a loan.
Yeah, so I do wonder how much of it is about trying to bring in some sort of consistency.
It's also a bit of a dig at the previous government as well, isn't it?
It's partly that, but I was going to say, actually, I think it's more to do with, again, the working person who sat there, maybe were furloughed or whatever it might be. They're upset because they're thinking the 10% have run away with all this money. It was all my tax money. Yeah. Whereas in the reality of it, it's not as much money as we think. So I think it's actually about getting some goodwill back for those people, which I don't think will result in anything.
I don't think so at all. I think it's almost impossible for them to police at any tangible level, really. They might catch a few people, make some examples. So if it happens again, then you think twice about it. But like people that sat at home who were furloughed on 80% or even having topped up, they did all right out of it as well.
I think so.
I mean, there's countries in Europe where there was no furlough scheme, nothing at all. You just went, sorry, that's it. Just tough pooey that you can't pay your rent and, deal with your landlord sort of thing.
But they won't have the corruption police coming to get them.
No, they'll have the some other police coming and getting the tax dodge.
So,
Yeah, so I think sort of moving on from that, really, there was some stuff about property in there as well, about the stamp duty land tax changing, and also a very brief mention about planning and encouraging to build more, but then nothing really on that at all, other than they're going to employ a load more planning officers, which, speaking personally, the planning process is notoriously long and is complicated, and you're dealing with the public sector, and most of them work from home now, or somebody said to me, you just drop the W and that's what they do from home, and that's it, and there's no working bit going on. Whether that's fair or not, I don't know, but it does take an inordinate amount of time to get planning stuff over the line. But yeah, no real mention as to what any of that really meant, to be honest. Just we want people to build more homes. So I'd like to have seen something, maybe relaxing some of the planning law. There were, in the last government, they said about like blocks of flats, if they were purpose built with 3 floors within a certain era, so like 1970s to 1990s, you got automatic planning permission to build 2 extra floors on the roof, and it was like permitted development. They then decided to tweak that a bit to stop developers just going bonkers for it, and these not high rise, but like 4 or 5 floor buildings appearing everywhere. So then everyone's retracted out of that. So it would have been interesting to have seen kind of what their plans are for build more, or get builders building or whatever, or get building more homes or whatever the phrase was, but not really a lot on that.
I'm sure some more information will come out over the coming days, because again, it's a fairly short speech to cover all these things, isn't it? But you're right, there was no meat in there for those things at all. And the stamp duty, for people buying second homes is absolutely going to hurt.
Yeah.
Especially down south, where house prices are so expensive.
It's almost taken away from someone who wants to put money away for their nest egg in the future in 20 years' time, and turning it more to a property professional, obviously, more like yourself, rather than the one-man band who, we've got a deposit or an inheritance, which will now be taxed potentially even more. Then we'll buy a little property, rent it out for 15, 20 years. Yeah. That's kind of getting abolished, isn't it? In real time
anymore.
Exactly.
I don't think it's new policy, that kind of bash the landlord thing. It's been around for a long time now, and they've had this massive shift about kind of moving away from like what I call your mum and pop landlords or accidental landlords. Where it's couples and they've met and then they rent one property out and they live in the other. They don't want that anymore. Like it's fairly unproductive. Most people don't declare the tax, or like it's open to that anyway. And so I think the shift towards professional landlords has been massive over the last probably 5 to 7 years or something. They've kind of wanted to do away with those kind of early 2000s kind of baby boomer type, people that have bought properties and had them in that
prices
time.
Prices were relatively low back then.
Low compared to earnings, though, I suppose, isn't it? But that's the disparity. Like I remember being on like £14,000 a year when I was like 20, and that was like I had a good job then. That wouldn't even touch the sides now. Wow. But property prices have like gone like that compared to wages.
I think if your parents earned 40,000 in the 1990s, it's equivalent to them being one of them being on 125k a year now. Yeah. So that's like to keep up with real life inflation, which is huge.
Having a parent of that age who was also actually a semi-accidental landlord, with a couple of properties, actually they don't understand that. They're not seeing. They went through the 15% inflation, interest rates and all that stuff.
Early 90s.
But actually, that's because the house prices in relation to their wages are nothing like they are today.
They got a great deal, didn't they? Back in the day.
Yeah.
But
so
we're also saying, weren't we, that it wasn't actually mentioned, but they've announced that the Making Tax Digital rules the limit for doing quarterly summaries will be down to 20,000 by the end of this Parliament.
Yeah.
But a lot of landlords don't realise that. But they think that's for self-employed people, and they don't realise that actually they are going to have to do quarterly summaries.
So this is like your kind of school teacher employed, they've got 2 buy-to-let properties, they're going to start having to do quarterly tax returns.
Anybody with a self-employment income, landlord, rental income, or combination.
Is it one or the other, or both? Okay.
Yeah, so you add the 2 together.
They get you everywhere.
Yeah. So if either singly or combined, if you are both, initially it's 50,000.
Yeah.
income, not taxable income, that's your actual income, then that's 2026, then it drops to 30,000, and they're saying it will drop to 20,000. So anybody...
Would that include pension? I'm just actually thinking generally about my parents.
No, it's from the rental income, and so if they're rental income,
Okay.
not their total income.
So 2% stamp duty, land tax, painful for me and for anybody else buying second homes. Obviously, we're a development business as well, so that's going to affect us. That's £2,000 on every £100,000 worth of stuff you buy. They also closed the loophole where if you were bought at auctions, they also now include the auction fee in the total fee now. So if you're paying like 4% auction fee or something, that's part of the purchase of the property. So
they get more that way.
Yeah, get even more that way. So yeah, that's going to be fairly colossal. But having had a thought about it, I think put it out there, this probably sounds like a ludicrous statement for me to make, but I think it's probably actually a fairly good thing. Like it's a reasonable rise, I think. I know that sounds a bit crazy because it's going to cost me money personally.
It could have been a lot worse.
It could have been a lot worse. And they didn't bash the landlords anywhere else. And I know there's a lot of Rental Reform Act stuff coming out soon, which is completely different legislation. But what it will allow is that it's in their remit for that drive away from that non-professional landlord, I think. So for me, it's going to be like there'll be more people going, well, we were trying to sell anyway because we wanted to exit the market because of Section 24 legislation. So I'm thinking those people still want to sell. And then no new small buy-to-let landlords are going to want to buy those properties because they're already struggling for interest rates and the rest of it. And now you've got another 2% on top. You just take an average flat around here, maybe 200 grand. That's another £4,000 they're going to have to pay to purchase that property. So it's going to widen the gap between your kind of professional landlord and non-professional, if you like. So they'll get removed out of the market, which means that is, there's less players in it for developers. So I think that's a good thing. It will also probably initially reduce house prices because people will go, I was struggling to sell it before this announcement, and now I've kind of cut out some of the market from developers because they were already a bit thin on the ground. So really you're aiming at your first time buyers or house movers, and that will allow them to get on the ladder and then probably earn more money and be better off in their life or whatever they want to do.
It'll drive rent up though?
I think it will probably drive rent up because you'll end up with this kind of like us and them scenario where like the bottom earners will never be enough to afford the properties, whereas the people that accelerate through their careers will be able to buy those properties and then probably earn more money and then contribute back into the tax system that way. So yeah, I think for me, although it's painful, it will over a long period of time probably allow it to drive both ways. Plus, I'm also philosophical. We had a period during COVID where there was no stamp duty or reduced stamp duty. We bought loads of stock during that time, all under the threshold and the rest of it. Then there was a housing boom. So if you take over, or a price increase boom, if you take over like a 5-year period since COVID came in, then you have to take this into account and say, well, actually, like I've done all right there. So you have to, it's a long-term investment property, isn't it? Unless you're like flipping property or something like that, then I think that market will probably be a bit harder to be into.
So I think that's a good way to look at it. If you're looking to hold an investment like property for 15, 20 years, the 2% now, yes, it might sting you in the short term, but in 20 years' time, is it going to have a massive effect? Probably not. And like you say, if you've got economies of scale already, it's a great opportunity to purchase stuff that you might not be able to get your hands on.
With the capital gains tax changes, you've then got to realise what that's actually going to mean long term.
Yeah, I mean they're held in, for the most part, most professional landlords now will be holding them in company names. So obviously,
not so much a problem.
Capital gains tax is different because you'll pay corporation tax, and they didn't really fiddle with that. They said that was capped at 25%. So from that point of view, plus it's a long-term investment, I think. Anybody, unless you're flipping property, anybody that goes, I'm going to buy it, rent it for a few years and then sell it on, they're not professionals. They're not in that market, I don't think.
Do you think it will lead to shortage of rental properties? I know some areas have got a shortage in certain...
Yeah, without, for me, I say it's a good thing because I see those sort of opportunities for us. It will lead to a shortage. There'll be less people in the market, less people buying it. So then it's a supply and demand thing, isn't it?
They also mentioned on the council the right to buy. They're going to reduce the right to buy or increase the prices of right to buy. So again, people who want to buy are then being held back a little bit, but I think they want to get more people buying.
Yeah.
So by releasing stock, I guess.
We're obsessed in the UK with like owning your own property.
Yeah.
Like you go around the rest of the world. I mean,
it's not.
maybe excluding like America and some other countries, but definitely mainland Europe, they don't buy at all really.
They all rent, don't they?
Yeah,
It's
right.
like
Most of them rent, and you have one landlord, massive block of flats, and it's like you rent for long periods of time, and they supply with all the furniture and the rest of it, and they just pummel their money into their pensions, and they just think, well, what was I going to do? Sell the property, downsize, and then live off the equity. So I might as well just rent
British
it.
mentality.
Yeah.
I think I've got this how much house, and I'll just somewhere magically money will appear when we retire. But
I think the UK has the worst performing pension and the longest to retirement out of all European countries.
oh, really? Is that true?
Something like that.
Does it?
Yeah, something like that. It's up there.
There we go.
So Matt, what would you advise your clients to do now, or was it a kind of key takeaway? Would you say?
For me, it's understanding the rules for where that person is individually, because everyone's different. It's very easy to kind of do something different with what the masses are doing. So understand your personal circumstances, understand what's right for you now, and then act on that accordingly. Don't just act for the sake of acting. But everything changes often. So it's following the rules in front of you and doing what's best for you in this moment, I would say. But not panicking, understanding the rules personally, and then moving on.
Yeah, you don't want people like selling off their stock because they misunderstood what's been said today. Yeah.
Don't listen to the man down the pub that's celebrating.
There's extra pints.
You got any advice for small businesses, like kind of your 6 and down employees that are going to be mostly affected?
You just got to review your costs.
Look at your P&L and your management accounts and see where you can make some savings.
Run some cash flow forecasts to actually see what effect it's going to have on you moving forward. If you were looking at taking on new employees, is that still the best course of action, or whether it would be better to use any outsourcing or subcontractors?
Yeah.
Just from a cost point.
And it's April, isn't it? That's kicking in, so they've got time if you're a small.
Exactly. And also, obviously, you've got the state pension going up slightly. 4.1%. And this year we've got people that have been pushed into paying tax. So we'll probably have some more that will.
I know there's a lot of like the triple lock was like talked about a lot as well,
We're
which
keeping
is
the triple lock in place for a bit.
Which I'm not sure if that's sustainable really with all of that. Like as time goes by, it's a popularity thing. You've got to commit to what you say. But it's a bit like the freezing of the tax bands, personal allowances, and the rest of it. I think I was saying that by the time you get to 2028, like it's kind of going to be irrelevant that they then say it's going up by 2%. You know, it's
not changed for 5 years plus.
Yeah. So just have a look at your P&L, your profit accounts, and the rest of it. And you got time to, I mean, what are we, October now? So we're best part of 6 months before this is all going to kick in.
Another budget by then, they might change the budget.
But just on that, it's
by the way, I forgot to mention there's 25% tax-free allowance on your pension, so we forgot that bit.
But it is worth, because information is readily available out there. It is speaking to the experts in every industry so that you know where you are. There's so many people that come to you in any industry and go, I've done this because the man in the pub said it. Just speak to people.
Yeah, and you can't, I think a takeaway for people is you can't anticipate everything in life. Like you don't, they move the goalposts on purpose to keep you on your toes a little bit because it will capture people that have done like, I found a loophole, I'll do that. And then they close the loophole and you go, okay, we'll have to move that over here now and do that. And it might cost me a bit doing that transaction and that they make money and generate income that way as well.
Exactly what you said earlier on. It depends whether they're 20, 50, 65 or 85. And it's the same from, what we do. It's very much different advice. How much you can do with it, where do you want to be? What position do you want to be in? What will change in 5 years' time? We don't know, do we? So do what you can do for now.
Might be a new government in 5 years' time.
They don't like this one.
No, exactly.
Have you got any key tips for your sort of clientele?
Well, I mean, key tips is a bit of an interesting. So one of the downsides.
Or requests. Don't panic, stay calm.
Yeah, well, definitely don't panic. It's always a case of, I said, do what you can do, and we'll base it on what we're at now. One of the things that was discussed, which we do use quite often, is BPR or alternative markets to invest in, because they can get your money out within 2 years rather than the 7-year rule. And they then put tax on that, basically. So if you've got more than £1 million invested there, that again was the same as a agricultural thing, wasn't it? It was 50% over and above. So
that's interesting, because there was talk before the thing about ICE changes to ISAs as well, wasn't there? Like saying there's a limit, like you couldn't have more than 100 grand in an ISA, and that didn't feature today either.
But again, I don't know if it's just how much they actually mentioned in the speech, and then what filters into it just afterwards.
Yeah.
So we were reading just after there was a mention that ISAs are staying £20,000 cap per year to 2030.
Oh, okay.
So we read that after.
Yeah.
So
Oh, okay, I didn't read that yet.
But
Yeah.
it's
It wasn't
mentioned.
mentioned, but not
Yes, you can have as much in there, but if people have.
But that's a big difference. With inflation having been what it's been, keeping it at 20k.
And they scrapped the previous budget, 25,000 with the extra 5,000 UK shares that's gone now. So
So again, but
again,
what's that is the average. They have picked possibly 20 grand in an ISA to put in.
Yeah.
does the average, like you said, does the average person have 20 grand a year to put into an ISA? And
Not
I'd
if you're a
say
working person.
No,
No, but that's the definition.
Well, if you need to be earning probably at least 60k, I'd say, to put a third of your income in. Like you could live off 40k maybe, and then you put in the other bit in. But that's net.
Gross.
Yeah.
So gross is over 100.
Yeah.
Or close to 100.
You're looking at a lot.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's pretty there. So, okay. In terms of people that I'm involved with, key tips, I suppose, is a bit like not to panic really. But I do think if you're in the professional landlord space, then I would say that it's probably a good thing long term. You have some short term pain, but over the longer period, you'll find that this 2% and things like that is not that impactful on it, and it will drive up rents and the rest of it and things, so which will affect the working person supposedly. So I think that, and then really representing the employment side. I know you touched on it already, but again, look at your costs and the rest of it, see where you can trim back things. And these things go up and down. They may change it again at some point, so you might just ride it out. If you've got some members of staff you're thinking about letting go or whatever because this is the cost, maybe have a look at your kind of expenditure, if you like what subscription things you've signed up to that you don't really need anymore, or maybe let people work from home and therefore you're saving on the office space. So, yeah.
Buy more beer.
Yeah, buy more beer.
Yeah.
Do Friday beers with the staff. And then it's tax deductible as well.
Beer tap in your office.
Right, well, that's been really great. I think as time goes by, there'll be more that comes out of the budget. Absolutely. So I hope it's really useful for everybody, and having the expert panel here today. If you like the channel at all, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Give these guys some love. I'm sure they've all got their own websites if you just want to just shout them out now.
Yes, actually, for Marriott Succession Planning, but I use the initials MASUPL.com. So, yes, please.
Yeah. Awesomeaccountants.co.uk.
And machanwealthmanagement.co.uk.
Yeah, so if you want any advice from these guys, reach out to them there. So we'll see you in the next podcast, and thanks very much, everybody.
Thank you very much,
Appreciate
man.
it. Thank you.
Cheers, guys. Yeah.
We'll see you.